Hi guys, I'm Nick Bester and welcome back to my channel. When I first started running, my 5K time was just over 25 minutes. Over a course of about 9 years, I've been able to build that down to under 15 minutes. And to be honest, my heart rate when I ran that first 5K as hard as possible in over 25 minutes was probably the same, if not higher, than my heart rate when I was able to go sub 15 minutes. So the question I get asked a lot of the time is, how do you run faster at a lower heart rate? What I'm going to do is explain in this video everything I've learned as an athlete and as a coach in order for you to run faster at a lower heart rate yourself. Think about us building the house of our base as best as possible. So that's our zone 2 running. Our zone 2 is the foundation of our house. It's the bricks that go into our house. Then our zone 3, 4, and 5, that's sort of the roof of the house. In order for us to peak and get to the roof of a house, we need to build that proper aerobic base. And if we don't, then our house will just come crashing down. If we just train in zone 4 and 5 and sort of race in those zones, we'll have a very high roof and top end speed, but we won't have enough of a foundation to support that, and we'll hit a wall within training. So the bigger we can build our aerobic base, the better our heart rate will be at those easy everyday runs. And your zone 2 aerobic sort of base area that I want us to work on is probably around 65 to 72% of what your heart rate max is. By this, you should feel pretty comfortable on these runs. They're easy everyday runs. You should be able to hold a conversation, and about 80% of our training should be within the zone. What we want to avoid is we want to avoid too much training in zone 1 because that's probably too easy. So that's below 65% of what your max heart rate is, and too much training in zone 3. Okay, we'll enter zone 3 a little bit more later when we get to hill and tempo sessions and sort of some of your longer runs, and we push on to zone 4. But zone 2 is a crucial part to training. I know it's not that fun. Often we want to just, put in those performance runs and really ramp up our training, but we need that 80% foundation base work in our zone 2 training. I just want to explain zone 2 a little bit more. So what that means is that it should feel relatively easy on your run. Okay, so running, it's never easy for anyone. Even easy runs are not that easy, but it should feel relatively comfortable. And what I mean by that is, you can pick up the phone and have a conversation almost the whole way. You can chat to someone along the way, and you finish your run and you feel almost physically and mentally rejuvenated. It doesn't feel like you're pushing too hard. I would just like to thank the sponsors of this video, TORRAS. As someone who is very active on social media, running out of battery is never a fun experience. But thankfully, with my new mini power bank, I never need to worry about this. This little thing right here charges your phone from 0 to 100 in just 2 hours. Check out what it's all about. This little thing is my mini mag power bank, my everyday carry. Perfect for when I need to charge my phone on my London trips. I also got a phone case from them which acts as a stand too. TORRAS is the pioneer of round stand phone cases. Here's an example of me using it out on the run. It's small, simple, yet effective and easy to use. It protects my phone and makes vlogging on the run a whole lot easier. This ostand case is perfect for when I'm running around these country roads looking to showcase the beautiful background whilst vlogging. You don't need to rely on any other people. You just find a flat spot to put your phone down and vlog away. It's so simple to use. You just pull this part out and it stands by itself. Here I am vlogging after my long run. Absolute sweat fest, but this phone case makes it easy to hold. Another really cool feature about this ostand is that you can swivel this 360-degree rotator at the back to make the phone angle suit you best for your background setting. If you're often on the go like me and don't want to lug around a big power bank and stand, then here is your answer right here. It'll easily fit into your pocket or gel belt too. Life is far too short to worry about running out of battery, so get yours today. Details are in the description below. Remember, when we're following heart rates, our watches often have built-in heart rate monitors, but we need to run with an external heart rate strap, okay? Either around your chest or around your arm, and then it becomes a lot more accurate. As soon as sweat gathers underneath these, they become inaccurate. Once we're monitoring heart rates, you sort of know that you're in the correct zone. So be mindful of it during your run. If it starts creeping over 72%, it's fine. It can go sort of up to 75%. Obviously, when we're running up hills, it's going to spike a little bit more. And when we're running downhills, a little bit less, but it's that average heart rate throughout the run sort of replicates whether you're in the right training zone and running towards the correct effort. Then often I get asked from runners, should you walk or should you stop if your heart rate does exceed that 75%? And my recommendation to that is probably look to do an easy jog. You don't want to stop and walk to disrupt that rhythm that you're going through, but ideally you do want your heart rate to drop so you're training within the correct training zone. If you're coming back from your easy runs and you're averaging 80% of your heart rate max, you know you're working a lot too hard. And alternatively, if you're only averaging 50 to 60% of your heart rate max, well, you know you can pick it up a little bit more. As mentioned earlier in the video, our zone 1 heart rate and zone 3 heart rates, we want to avoid spending too much time there. So basically, we want to either work on that aerobic base and then work on the higher end and pivot from there. We don't want to spend too much time in that middle ground. Zone 1, that's sort of beneath our base, that's the soil to our house. We can tick that box off when we do our everyday walking or walk to the shops. Then zone 3, we might find that we start within the zone, especially on things like your longer run tempo sessions, but ideally we want to pivot off zone 3 and head into zone 4 within these runs. Okay, so I've touched based on how important that 80% of our foundation of our houses, but let's not underestimate just how important that roof of our house is, that 20%. Okay, so 80% sort of zone 2, 20% zone 3, 4, and 5, and zone 3 and 4 is probably around 15% or so. That's your hill running, your tempo running, a lot of your longer runs. And then zone 5, we sort of get into that sort of back end of intervals and into our racing. We probably can only sustain that for around 5% of our training. That's very, very, very high end when you feel like the body's almost about to explode. And ultimately, let's not underestimate just how important that 20% of quality is. Do you know what I often say is there's probably 2.5 harder days in a week. So if you do like a harder Tuesday, a harder weekend, and an intermediate middle day, everything else easy in between, if we consistently train to that sort of smart structure, so zone 2 and then zone 3, 4, 5, zone 2, zone 3, 4, 5, zone 2, and keep those ratios in line with that, what we're doing is we're going to shift our whole house upwards, let's say, which will shift our whole heart rates in the right direction as well. And what that means is you'll either run at the same pace at a lower heart rate, so it means you're putting in less effort now for the same pace, or you're running slightly faster at the same effort. So your heart rate will be the same, but you've now become a faster runner. So that base work is incredibly important, but that roof 20% work is just as important for us to shift everything in the right direction. Remember, it doesn't happen overnight. So do this week in, week out. Some weeks are going to feel great, some weeks might not, but be consistent as possible, and I promise you over time you'll see the results. Another few things worth mentioning is that once you become a more experienced runner, your body is actually able to handle this higher end zones for longer. Okay, so what I mean by that is in my early running years when I ran 25 minutes for 5Ks, I could hit zone 3, 4, 5 no problem, but I couldn't sustain zone 5 for as long as I can sustain zone 5 for now. So over time your body adapts, your muscle adjusts, you're able to handle the load, especially at that higher end level, and you're able to stay within those zones for longer. Remember, your heart is a muscle in your body, and just as we train our muscles to adapt over time, we're also training our hearts to adapt overtraining as we go along. And the bigger we can get our aerobic base, that more solid our foundation, the more opportunity we give ourselves to really nail it at that top end roof speed. What you might find, especially in your early years of running, is that it takes your body time to adapt to training. And often, whilst the body's adapting to running, you find that you have niggles and you have potential injuries, and you may need to incorporate cross training, which I highly encourage. Things like spin bike, swimming, elliptical. So plan out your structured weekly training, and if you can't do it running, that's completely fine. There's huge benefits to cross training. In actual fact, sometimes it's almost more beneficial to your running than running in itself. Especially in your early years of running. But the way to monitor that you're running to the correct effort or cross-training to the correct effort is by checking your heart rate throughout. So if you were going to go for a zone 2 run between 65 to 72% of your max, when you're on that elliptical or the bike, just be mindful that you're in the correct zone and putting in the correct effort you would normally as if you were running, to make sure you're keeping training as smart and as productive as possible. Now let's rewind it a little bit. How do you work out what your maximum heart rate is? So I find quite a good test to do is find quite a long hill and then run up the hill for 60 seconds at a steady effort, sort of a tempo effort, somewhere around 75 to 80%, working comfortably tough. Once you get to a minute, your heart rate would have risen significantly. Then put in a 30-second surge as fast as possible. Sprint for another 30 seconds, or you might not even make 30 seconds. Sprint for as long as you can. Once you're at the end of that, you'll probably find that you're at your maximum heart rate or very, very close to. Another really good way that I reach it personally, a lot of people have said this distance is too far for you to reach your maximum heart rate, but it's the highest I've ever got mine to, is actually in a 5K race. So I encourage you to race regularly, especially, shorter distance races we recover quite quickly. And in the 5K distance, I find that it's the maximum I can get my heart rate. There's nothing quite like racing, so you can push yourself in training, but when there's others around you, they help you to push yourself to that limit. See what you get to, go back on data in these 5K races, and then work out what your max heart rate is from there. Remember, it's worth noting, we all have different heart rates. So it's not about having the highest heart rate or the lowest heart rates. It's about seeing what your heart rate is and trying to shift it in the right direction. You'll probably find that as you get fitter over time, your heart rate should naturally drop. And just to remind you, the way we run faster at a lower heart rate is by training smart, keeping training productive, and being as consistent as possible, building that base, that 80% zone 2 foundation of our house, and then really sharpening up at that sharp end 20%. Once we get that combination right and we do it week in, week out, we keep training smart, we shift everything in the upwards directions, which means our heart rate improves. We should get faster at the same effort. Hopefully you've learned a lot from this video. Go out there, train smart, train productive, and please let me know how you get along.